Hey there. I want to do a quick reaction after sitting through the debate, the sham debate between Marco Rubio and Val Demings, the two-party candidates for the U.S. Senate, of which I am also a candidate. My name is Dennis Misigoy, the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate on every ballot here in the state of Florida. My name will probably be smack dab in that list of 5 names, and it's indicative of many things. The fact that these two show up for this debate and obviously get all the media coverage, even though the fact that they were invited into at least two other candidate forums, debates, one back in September, on September 15th, that I participated in. That was in Merritt Island, and obviously if you couldn't make it to there was another candidate forum, a little bit briefer, that actually was hosted down in Key Largo. However, they were even allowing us to connect remotely, so if you happen to be campaigning anywhere else in the state and happen to just not be able to get there, and I know the Keys are a little bit harder to get to, well, you could connect remotely and you could have participated in that. But Marco Rubio and Val Demings, they don't want anything to do with a forum that has to do with, that involves the other candidates. So I just wanted to, gather some of my thoughts on this and, try to, just give my sort of reaction. Again, it's just so much of the same. Again, one of the things I thought about really right after finishing watching it was the fact that I didn't hear a single mention of the U.S. Constitution in that whole debate. It's not even relevant to these folks, and certainly when you're talking about defining what's the role of the federal government, the role of a U.S. senator, and what they really have power to do, that really should be central to it. And when you get into these discussions and they're talking about capping the price of insulin like there at the end, and again, I guess you really wouldn't have had a chance to respond to that, but the very fact that these things are even thrown out there, it shows a wanton disregard. Marco Rubio was bragging himself about taking on the pharmaceutical companies and various laws that he's been involved in passing, and he's very proud of passing a lot of laws. I want to be the senator who'd be proud of repealing a lot of laws. We had a lot of bad laws on the book and a lot of government intervention into the markets, into the healthcare market, and into so many other places. And so, it's worthwhile to, we need to have a candidate who represents that. It's important. I want people to understand that there's no candidate here who represents government staying out of your life, government respecting your rights. There's no candidate there who's interested in peace, who says, hey, I don't actually want a war with Russia, or I want to de-escalate. You didn't hear anything about de-escalation. You heard about, well, if Russia does this, well, then NATO and us, we got to get together and decide this and that. And, Rubio's so proud about having been anti-Putin for so long. It's not about being anti-Putin or pro-Putin. The reality is we need to be pro what's best for the United States of America. And one of those things is quite clearly not getting into a war with another nuclear armed power. It just makes absolutely no sense. And we keep traveling down this path. There's no discussion of the fact that there hasn't been any serious effort at diplomacy, that we've really kind of stifled diplomatic efforts, and the only diplomatic efforts by our executive branch has been to try to get Brittany Griner released, not to try to de-escalate the conflict that's going on in Ukraine. There's not even talk about the amount of money being spent. As a matter of fact, the only real talk I heard about kind of defense spending, military war kind of spending, was Rubio suggesting that we actually need to spend more. And it's absolutely mind-boggling and insane when you talk about the fact that the the NDA for this fiscal year was over $750 billion, over $760 billion. For the next fiscal year, what they've been bouncing around, I believe, is at around over $840 billion, over $850 somewhere in that ballpark. And you're talking about more than 4/5 of a trillion at that point. And he says we need to spend more to keep up with China, who, in terms of their defense spending, is spending about, like a third of what we're spending, roughly, give or take. We spend about 3 times what they do. But it's, and if they're really advancing, even though they're really advancing and they're getting past us, which I'm not quite sold on, but let's say hypothetically that's true, that they're surpassing us in technological prowess, yet we're spending 3 times what they're spending. That should suggest to anybody critically thinking about this that there's a lot of malinvestment in what we're doing, and it's not simply the sort of what's the word? I guess sensitivity or this sort of cultural training stuff that he's talking about with pronouns and this and that. No, it's the fact that we've got hundreds of military bases all over the world, and this vain pursuit of empire, our foreign policy that is so misguided, and it needs to come to an end. There's not even a debate about this. This is just kind of taken for granted between these two candidates. You know, Val Demings going ahead with it as well, saying, we're the most powerful country in the world. We got to be the ones who are doing all this stuff. And so, and I'm the candidate. If you want the candidate who's not on board with that, the candidate who believes America would be better off minding its own business, our people would be richer, our economy would be stronger, and we would get along with other countries, and there wouldn't be this threat of nuclear war if we weren't trying to push buttons everywhere, expand NATO all the way to Russia's border, and just going on and going on. If we weren't doing this, we might have a little bit fewer of these problems. If we weren't involved all over the Middle East, maybe we might not be such a ripe target for terrorist attack. But you've got to put Americans first. I'm going to say that instead of America first, because I don't want to talk about the government, and I'm talking even about the land. I'm talking about the people, taking care of the people here. I want to think what other policies. There was a little bit of lip service paid to inflation, but there's nobody talking about the Federal Reserve. Printing trillions of dollars is the root cause. You can't create trillions of dollars like we did, or I shouldn't say we did, they did, back especially in 2020, over $2 trillion for the CARES Act, and another $4 trillion that they just went ahead and injected into the system themselves. And you can't do that and have it not affect the value of the dollar, okay? And there's just no getting around it. And these guys, they don't even want to talk about it. It's not even on their radar. And so when they argue about, trying to help people or deal with inflation or deal with the economic situation, it's not even mentioned. And that's, again, part of the difference. I'm the audit the Fed and the Fed candidate. I want sound money through monetary freedom. And that's a stark contrast from these folks who want you to keep using the Federal Reserve funny money, fiat dollar, okay? There's not even talk about, obviously, which one of these wants to cut spending. Not a one. They're not even, Rubio doesn't even pretend at this point, so he's that doesn't even get mentioned here. Free markets and free trade. No, we want to have, we have Val Demings talking about, well, we need to hold people who aren't our friends accountable, which I thought was just such a weird statement. It's like, well, okay, if the country's not our friend, we want to hold them accountable. But I guess if the country is our friend, like Saudi Arabia, and they're engaged in human rights abuses, I guess we don't want to hold them accountable. That's a real weird thing to say, but I guess it's one of those nice situations where, the truth slips out. But it's such a weird statement and a weird position to take. Anybody who's doing bad should be held accountable, whether they're our friend or not our friend. And it certainly doesn't even make sense that if someone is not kind of under our stewardship in any meaningful way, who are we to necessarily be holding them accountable in what situation? Again, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, they're terrible, they're awful, and they do awful things. But what standing does the U.S. have to go and hold them accountable for abuses in their own country? And more importantly than that, not even just what legitimate standing, because the U.S. is not the government of China, and the U.S. is not the government of the world, and we shouldn't pretend to be. But I'll take it even a step back. Again, the actual limits, the physical limits of our power, even if we thought we're completely justified, even if you believe that the U.S. has a right and a duty and everything else to set things right and to fix things and, to free the Uyghurs and do whatever else, there has to be some recognition, and I think that there is on some level, of the limits of our power. But if we recognize the limits of our power, like what we saw in Afghanistan after 20 years, the longest war in American history, over $2 trillion, so much death and destruction, and what happened within a week of us leaving, the Taliban had control of the entire country again. And there needs to be a recognition of the limits of our power. And if we have a recognition of the limits of our power, then we probably should also dial back the rhetoric. We've got to stop. We've got to stop with this. We've got to tone it down and find a way to make peace with people we don't agree with, people who are bad people even. But we have to recognize, for the sake of our country, we're again $31 trillion in debt. I didn't hear anything about $31 trillion in debt. Strange. Didn't hear anything about the Constitution. Didn't hear about the debt. Don't hear about cutting spending. Don't hear about certainly nothing about free markets and free trade and how to really help the economy work. Both of these two, again, and I guess there really wouldn't be much to talk about because, again, both of these two agree on taking federal tax dollars from taking money from certain people in the economy, from the productive people in the economy, through taxes to the federal government. They get their cut, and then they're going to invest that money in other businesses that they think should succeed, even if they're not being successful on their own. And I guess in either scenario, really, the other possibility of what it is with the recipients of this money, because it's one of two things. Either it's a company that is not successful, and now you're giving them money from somebody else who is successful and misallocating these resources to somebody who's not productive, or what you're doing with these companies is you're taking a company that's already successful and you're giving them more money that they don't need to just try to beef them up. And it just, again, it's just favoritism. It's corporate welfare in all its worst forms. And so this is government meddling in the economy. And there's not even a hint about this in this debate. One of the things I thought would have been a topic would have come up on this as well, police reform. Both of these two, really tout their bona fides as being, the pro-police candidate. Obviously, Val Demings with her history as a police chief, but also Marco Rubio. He has all the police chief endorsements and all the sheriffs and everything else. So that's obviously an interesting dynamic. But they're just fighting over who's the more pro-cop candidate. And I'm not, again, as I've said many times, I'm not afraid to be the pro end qualified immunity candidate, the end civil asset forfeiture candidate, the end no-knock raids candidate. I'm not afraid to be that guy, but there's nothing there, and and maybe that's why there's no debate on it, why there's no discussion on it. But that's been a big topic in the last decade. Have been those kind of abuses and so many of these events that have been caught on video, particularly as technology has made it possible for everybody to be walking around and recording stuff. So many tragedies that have been caught on camera and abuses of power, and more cases than I can name, to be sure. And the lack of accountability, and again, this is one of these things that's not on there. There's no option if you're looking for vote in the two parties. There's no option there. If you want the police reform option, this is the only one: is vote Libertarian, vote Gold, vote for me, Dennis Misigoy. I wouldn't expect it, but I had on my little list here of things that don't get mentioned. I mean, they talk about drug prices, they talk about prescription drugs because they want to make sure that prescription drugs that the money's going there, but certainly they're not talking about the drug war. They're on the same page with that, and that's not a central issue. But there's a lot of people still having their lives destroyed over victimless crimes. Over simply possessing a substance, and it's not just marijuana. I'm glad, Biden taking some steps about it, but so far as my understanding, there's not a single person getting out of prison on account of his recent decisions. So it's important for us to understand the reality of all of this. And so, I'm going to kind of wrap it up there. This is just a little bit about my reaction to it. Maybe I'll do something where I go bit by bit. I don't know, but I want you guys to understand there's so many of these things that are just not even discussed, and there's no peace candidate, there's no anti-war candidate in the two-party system. There is no pro-Constitution candidate, pro-Second Amendment. You got Marco Rubio even owning up to his support for red flag laws. He's trying to split hairs and say about what's a good red flag law versus a bad red flag law. But I think people who understand the Second Amendment understand they don't want the government in power to just go and say, hey, look, we think you're bad, so we're going to go and take your guns away. And the whole point here, if part of the Second Amendment, if the central part of the Second Amendment is to be able to stand up to government tyranny, empowering government to disarm people, through some kind of back channel, somebody who hasn't actually committed a crime, that's an affront to that. Marco Rubio, he says some of the right things, but at the end of the day, if he's supporting a law that's going to undermine the Second Amendment, that's the difference. I'm the candidate who's not going to support the laws that will undermine the Second Amendment. I want people to have the right to the means to protect themselves, and I don't want the law-abiding citizen to be set at a disadvantage or to be set to be put in a position where they can be undermined if you happen to be on the wrong side of popular political views. I mean, we've already seen how other laws and the whole sort of anti-terrorism apparatus has been turned from being against terrorism, what we perceive after 9/11, coming out of the Middle East, Muslim extremists and whatnot, what people perceived at that point. to now being turned on. We're talking about angry mothers at school board meetings as domestic terrorists. Anything any law we approve, you can bet your bottom dollar is going to be turned on somebody on your side of things sooner or later, whether it's you or somebody else or whatever. So if you have laws like this, they're going to be used against people. And it may not come soon. You may not even remember it when it happens, but you got to be mindful of this. And if we want to have a free country, we've got to stand against this sort of thing. I'm trying to think what else. I think I'm going to leave it at there. The Constitution, pro peace, sound money, economic freedom, monetary freedom. These are the things we need to have, and there's no option for those things in the two-party system. Not Marco Rubio, not Val Demings. I am the candidate. My name is Dennis Misigoy, the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate. I hope you guys will vote for me. I know some of you have already been voting, but if you haven't had a chance yet, if you're not doing a mail-in ballot and you're going to early voting, or you're going on November 8th, please, the middle of that list of 5 names, Dennis Misigoy, LPF, that's the Libertarian Party of Florida, join us. Let's make a statement. Let's lead the way for the country. Let's set an example that we're not going to accept candidates who are not pro-Constitution, that are not pro-freedom, that are not pro-peace, that are not pro-sound money. We're not going to accept business as usual. Let's set an example. Let's change the conversation. We can do it. No matter how many tens of millions of dollars they spend, flood you with ads, you know better. It's in your hands. You are the power. You are in control. It is your vote. Don't let anybody bully you into giving it up and telling you that you have to accept the establishment puppets, the tools of the system. Don't accept it. You are in control, and it's only by you guys that this can change. It's not going to change just by one person coming up here and being a candidate. It is you guys as the voters who are going to change it. So, I'm here to give us the opportunity because I think we needed it. I cannot tolerate the options like what we just saw on that debate stage. So I wanted us to have something different. So that's why I'm here as the candidate, and that's why I'm asking you guys for your support. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys will support me. Thank you.